I'm Ben Meiselas from the MeidasTouch Network, and this is a breaking news alert. The January 6th committee, in a unanimous 9-0 vote, voted to subpoena Donald Trump for testimony before the January 6th committee. This followed an incredibly compelling January 6th committee hearing. Earlier in the day, the January 6th committee went through Donald Trump's knowledge about how dangerous the insurrectionists were going to be, Donald Trump's knowledge of what the insurrectionists were going to do, the Secret Service's awareness and involvement, frankly, in what the insurrectionists were going to do, Trump's inner circle being aware of the dangers, Trump not just allowing the insurrectionists, not just a dereliction of duty, but really what we saw today at the hearing was Trump's affirmative involvement in encouraging and cheering on this violence, this dastardly insurrection, January 6th, another date that will just live in infamy in our nation's history. And following that presentation, we're going to be doing a lot more videos on the January 6th developments from today. The January 6th committee voted unanimously to subpoena Donald Trump before the committee. What are the legal ramifications of that subpoena? Well, the January 6th committee, as a duly authorized committee of Congress, has the ability to exercise its subpoena authority, and as with other individuals, to the extent Donald Trump obstructs or doesn't respond to the subpoena, he could be held in contempt of Congress. If Donald Trump is held in contempt of Congress, Congress can make a criminal referral to the Department of Justice. Congress itself does not have the power to indict. Congressional power deals with budget authorizations and passing laws and making recommendations, but Congress as a body is not allowed to criminally indict. They can make the referrals if Donald Trump obstructs or does not respond, but now the burden shifts to Donald Trump, who receives the subpoena, to respond. Now, what are the arguments that Donald Trump could potentially make not to respond to the subpoena? Well, he could simply ignore the subpoena, which was the Steve Bannon approach to things. And with respect to Steve Bannon, Steve Bannon was criminally referred. The Department of Justice prosecuted. Steve Bannon was found guilty. He's now awaiting sentences on 2 counts of contempt of Congress. Donald Trump can issue objections. He could plead the Fifth Amendment, like Mike Flynn did, like Roger Stone did, who asserted the Fifth Amendment right against self-incrimination. He could also try to assert objections, potential objections that I think are completely meritless, but which we can anticipate that Donald Trump may assert. Executive privilege, attorney-client privilege. For different reasons, attorney-client privilege and executive privilege here would likely not apply. Number one, as we've discussed on our countless videos relating to Judge Eileen Cannon, executive privilege lies with the current executive, not with prior executives. But if we were to go really in the weeds when it comes to the decisions regarding the assertions of executive privilege, it is a little bit undecided with respect to the Nixon GSA cases, which set the precedent on executive privilege. Here's what is clear. What Trump is trying to do in the Judge Eileen Cannon case is completely improper. You can't stop the executive branch from having its own executive documents, or you try to assert executive privilege over the actual executive branch. That's well-established law. That's why Judge Eileen Cannon's ruling is so frivolous. The one area which is a little bit gray, and I'm just being candid with you, is the issue over interbranch disputes. So an interbranch dispute here is Congress and a former executive. Could a former executive assert executive privilege as against a co-equal branch of government, Congress, and could that be asserted? Potentially. Vague area, but at least potentially a colorable argument could be made to assert executive privilege. I think ultimately executive privilege would not apply here, and that law, that precedent is not actually established. So I think we will see what happens there. But Donald Trump has talked about this all publicly. So I think anything that the January 6th committee would basically say, if they're being strategic here, which they're brilliant and they're advised by brilliant lawyers, they're going to say, look, all we want to question you on is things that you've said publicly, because Trump's run his mouth on a bunch of public thing, on all these things publicly anyway. So they're going to say, we're not even going to try to ask you questions about the things that you claim are, that you've done in secret. And we want to ask you questions about all of the public statements you've made at all of your rallies. You can't claim executive privilege regarding the statements you've made publicly. There is a waiver of executive privilege. There is a waiver of attorney-client privilege. There's a waiver of both. Also, there is the crime fraud exception. Remember what Judge David Carter said from the Central District of California. He sits in the Southern Division in Orange County, and he said that this wasn't an attorney-client relationship that Trump had with his purported lawyer, John Eastman. This was a coup in search of a legal theory. That's what was transpiring. And the January 6th committee was permitted to get records that John Eastman was trying to cloak using attorney-client privilege. So Trump can try to assert those privileges and object. He could try to, if he can invoke the Fifth Amendment, if he invokes the Fifth Amendment right against self-incrimination, then he wouldn't have to speak. And he's done that before Letitia James. But the ball is now in Trump's court. And how will Trump respond? The January 6th committee, to the extent the Democrats remain in power, the January 6th committee's mandate will continue. If MAGA Republicans take power, they will try to undermine our democracy. One of the first things they will do is disband the January 6th committee, allow lawlessness to take place. Look, you have the House Judiciary Committee, who would be a major factor in this. They're the ones who've been tweeting out pro-Kanye West information because Kanye West tweeted out anti-Semitic remarks. That's what the GOP House Judiciary Committees use their Twitter account for, to say we love Kanye because he spread these anti-Semitic remarks, in addition to a bunch of other heinous conduct by members of the House Judiciary Committee, the GOP members, that is. So we will see what happens here. We'll see, inevitably Trump will try to, run out the clock with objections before the election. But voters also have a clear sense of what's at stake. Donald Trump's going to have to respond one way or another to the subpoena. Will he assert objections? Will he just not respond? What will be the response? He's inevitably going to, I think, file some response. I think he'll assert those objections that I talked about. Will he initiate a case in a courtroom? Will he try to go in the Southern District of Florida and try to draw Judge Eileen Cannon again? Will it be heard in in Washington D.C. court? What's going to happen there? We will keep you updated. But ultimately, if Trump, the January 6th committee, they will continue to fight as long as they remain constituted. And I think Democrats are going to win the midterms. I think that we're going to fight together and we're going to win the midterms. But if the January 6th committee believes that Trump is obstructing, they could in time still submit a criminal referral to the Department of Justice, and the Department of Justice can choose to prosecute, as they've done with Bannon and Navarro, or they can decide not to prosecute, as they've done with Mark Meadows. And so your question is, well, why would Merrick Garland prosecute those two, but not prosecute Mark Meadows? I also think the Department of Justice is focused on the bigger picture here, though. Contempt of Congress carries with it, it's a misdemeanor. It carries with it a 1 year or less prison sentence on each count. So Bannon would face, for each count of contempt of Congress, contempt for not providing documents in response to the subpoena, for not showing up and being deposed. Those are 2 counts. 2 years or less would be the sentencing, and he's said to be sentenced soon. But what I mean by the bigger issue here is that the January 6th committee is focused on Donald Trump's overall conduct as it's relating to the fake electors, as it's relating to encouraging the insurrection, as it involves seditious conspiracy. Look what's going on in the courthouse with the guilty plea for seditious conspiracy of one of the Proud Boy leaders last week. Look what's going on with the Oath Keeper seditious conspiracy trial now. Remember, the Oath Keeper defense is like a public authority defense, where the Oath Keepers are arguing we were following the view that Donald Trump was going to give us the Insurrection Act green light to start taking out our guns and shooting up people on the ellipse. That's what the Oath Keepers' defense is in that case. They're saying we shouldn't be guilty because we wanted to follow what Trump did. So this is all part of Merrick Garland's strategy of tying this to Trump. You know, it's what happened, but how you get there methodically. You don't just start at the top and then zigzag and do it in a disorganized way. You have to do this in an organized, brick by brick way, which is what Merrick Garland's been doing, I think, masterfully. But Merrick Garland's probably thinking, like even with Mark Meadows is more useful to me as a cooperating witness or as someone who could be utilized in connection with these other investigations. Right? Mark Meadows, for example, was aware and is aware of what was going on with Trump stealing top secret documents and hiding them in Mar-a-Lago that didn't belong to him, which is now the subject of another criminal investigation taking place before a grand jury. We know Mark Meadows was intimately involved in that. So the Department of Justice is probably saying to people like Meadows, look, we can get you for this, we can get you for that, we can get you for this, we can get you for that. We want to make sure that ultimately we have our eye on the ball of making sure everyone who is responsible for trying to overturn our democracy, that they get prosecuted first and foremost, and make sure all the other crimes like Trump stealing top secret records as they pursue their investigation, that there is accountability there. So that's why the Department of Justice sometimes exercises its discretion in ways that we may find, well, why'd you do that? Why'd you do that? Because it's a strategy sometimes about which levers are you pulling and when, and we may get frustrated with that, but look at their victory. Look, they won in front of the Supreme Court when Donald Trump tried to engage in all of the delay and deflection and all the tactics regarding Judge Eileen Cannon's efforts to allow him to keep the, to delay the Department of Justice getting their own classified records back. So we will see what happens, but a big vote by the January 6th committee. Trump will be subpoenaed. Trump will have to respond. The January 6th, it's like tennis. January 6th, subpoena. Trump, respond. January 6th, respond. Trump, respond, okay, or not respond. DOJ comes in. DOJ can either prosecute or not prosecute, but that's what we will see in the next 60 to 90 days. We'll keep you updated here on the MeidasTouch Network with this and more developments. I'm Ben Meiselas. Until next time. Oh, hit subscribe. It's free. We're almost on our way to 1 million subscribers. What are you doing? Hit subscribe right now. Also, join our Patreon, will you? We don't have any outside investors. Wherever you live in the world, you can help grow this thing. How great would that be? So wherever you are in the world, I always get asked, we want to help MeidasTouch. What can we do to help MeidasTouch? Go to patreon.com. What are you waiting for? We need your help. patreon.com/MeidasTouch. patreon.com/MeidasTouch. Until next time, I'm Ben Meiselas from the MeidasTouch Network.
At MeidasTouch, we are unapologetically pro-democracy, and we demand justice and accountability. That's why we're spreading our message to Convict 45. That's right, gear up right now with your Convict 45 tees and pins at store.MeidasTouch.com. That's store.MeidasTouch.com.